Alright. Greetings, my fellow mushy blobs of subatomic particles. My name's Hans, father to these leafy monsteras, obsessed with teal bricks, and berserk for Legos. Today I present to you my fully operational Death Star. Oops. I mean, fully operational flatbed tow truck. So lift up your flat feet and wiggle your toes, because it's about to get totally awesome. Onwards to the origin story. Alright, and you guys are going to totally recognize this as 60017 flatbed tow truck from 2013. In 2013, this was the best flatbed tow truck they'd ever came out with, and it was pretty good. And they've also came out with another one in 60097, the City Square from 2015. And both of them pretty much function the same way. Now, I've always been, ever since I was a kid, one of those people that totally nerds out on industrial vehicles and machines and equipment, say like a crane or a bulldozer or a fire truck or a garbage truck. And tow trucks and flatbed tow trucks was always kind of one of those things. And just because of the way that they're able to carry the car on the back, which was great for luxury cars where you didn't want the car to get damaged in any sort of way, or cars that couldn't be towed, and especially like the lowrider cars that are really low to the ground, or even heavily damaged cars that have been in a wreck that are so bad that there's no possible way that they could even be towed. One thing that bugged me about 60017, the flatbed tow truck, is the fact that the flatbed really wasn't all that functional. It would just tilt back, and you just kind of had to assume that the car kind of leapt up onto the back of the truck, and you could kind of start pulling the car up onto the flatbed after you've already kind of placed it on there. There's absolutely no way that you could actually smoothly operate a car up onto the flatbed. And the other thing is that this particular flatbed was really only designed for cars that were 4 studs wide. I wanted to fix the flatbed tow truck so that it could take all different types of cars, like including Lego vehicles with the giant 4x4 wheels. And I've had plenty of experience having my car towed with a flatbed tow truck. I've definitely had my fair share of breakdowns and having to get a car towed. And so I've paid attention to how those things operate. And yeah, so what I really wanted to do was to include the full range of functionality that modern day flatbed tow trucks have. Alright, and before we talk about the tow truck, I also wanted to include in this video this electric sedan in this video. And this is 100% my own creation. So over last summer, I had this goal of creating cars in colors that Lego hasn't really done before. And that all started about because in some of the Friends sets, there are some Friends cars that have wheel fenders that are using a lot of the nice colors that Lego has. So Magenta, they have the medium azure fenders. And so that triggered a goal of mine, which was to kind of build some car MOCs that were using colors that Lego doesn't give us in the regular Lego City sets, which I really think they should. I mean, these are some really awesome colors, especially the dark azure and the medium azure. Those are really great colors. I've even created a car in the teal, and it wasn't until just this year that they finally came out with a car in the dark azure and the Lego Ideas car, which is in almost all teal. So I find it disappointing that Lego's had these amazing colors for quite some time, but in all the Lego City sets, they're not really giving us any vehicle MOCs in these new colors. They're kind of just sticking with the same old colors that they've always been using. And so this was a product of that experiment. And so for this one, I've always wanted to create a 4-door sedan. And that's not easy to do in Lego minifigure scale. Now, these magenta colored wheel arches only come in one set, which is 41013, Emma's sports car from 2013. I got that set just so I could get that car and do a remock of it. And it really wasn't a magenta car. It just had the wheel arches and the bumpers that were magenta. And the majority of the car was a light lavender. I was planning to remock it pretty heavily, but then I kind of abandoned the whole car itself and just took the wheel fenders and just built an all new car on my own. I was like, that car's a lost cause. I can't work with this. And I really just wanted to have a very solid magenta car. Now, the other thing I did is I paired the dark earth blue with the magenta, and I really like this pairing. And that really helped me use pieces that I don't have in the magenta colors. I don't have these 1x2 bow slopes with the cutout corners in magenta. And I just think the two colors complement each other really well. The other thing I like about this car is the 6-stud wide Speed Champion windshields that just came out in 2020 for the 8-stud wide cars. And I really love how it just made this car really sleek looking. So of course it's a car of the future, and I kind of gave it a futuristic mono headlight. It's got the futuristic autonomous driving sensor on the front. I've got the silver wheels on there, and I just really made it a very sleek, low low-slung sedan that's very coupe-like. And then I gave it the futuristic mono tail light, which is made from the grille pieces. And this basically represents a car that's supposed to have two doors here on the side. Now, the other thing about this is LEGO doesn't have a car chassis that's designed for 6 studs across the middle here. And because of it, the minifigure seat cavity is only 4 studs. So right now I can get 2 minifigures in there, but the first minifigure would not have a seat to lean back on. Now, of course, this is a car of the future. This car drives all by itself. So the steering wheel is gone. The minifigures are able to entertain themselves using a full-size touchscreen right there. It's got a little bit of a trunk right there. I also really liked using these 1x3 bow slope bricks right there on the back, which gives that car a very futuristic swept up on the backside, and the shoulder line of the car is nice and flat across the top there. So yeah, I love how this car came out. It's one of my favorite MOCs. It is very sleek. It is very sexy. I wish LEGO would do more of these kind of longer 4-door style LEGO cars in their city sets. Actually, I was surprised because in one of the new 2021 sets, they came out with a 4-stud wide sort of minivan looking car, but they actually made it so that there's 2 minifigures that can go in, one that sits behind the other. And this is going to be my tow truck demonstration vehicle. Alright, and the first thing I'll point out is obviously the wheel size change. And so what you see here is I have added the larger Speed Champion wheels, and I've mentioned this in several other of my videos as to why I do this. I would recommend go watch my Palace Cinema Limo video. I talk about my protocols of tire scale for all different ranges of LEGO vehicles that I mock up. And so this is what I do. So for all my industrial vehicles, I use this wheel size. And so of course that also means that I have to upgrade the fender pieces. Instead of the fender pieces that wrap all the way around, I have to use these halfway fender pieces. Now, the other thing to note is I am planning to build a LEGO city, Paradisa City, and it is a tropical city of the future in the year 2060. And in the year 2060, all the vehicles have autonomous driving capabilities. And so that's what this is. This little robot sensor basically represents the 5G wireless connection as well as the LiDAR and radar sensors on this vehicle. Now, in real life, you're not going to see these sensors. They're pretty much embedded in the front of the car, but I am having a lot of fun just adding these little robot eyes to the front of my cars to signify that they are autonomous driving. And also on that note, all the vehicles in Paradisa City are electric vehicles, and what you see here are not fuel tanks. They are massive, massive batteries that power this whole entire truck. And so if you want to know more about my upcoming Paradisa City in the year 2060, I definitely recommend going to watch my Transportation 2060 videos. There's 2 of them. One is the new road plates video, and the other one is my Hyperloop video, and it talks about the 5 modes of transportation, all the advanced technologies and features that will be in Paradisa City. This nose piece right here, I've left it alone. I'm not a big fan of this nose piece. It kind of gives vehicles a very pug nose look, and it's also very hard to get the corners of the vehicle on both sides to kind of conform and blend with this particular piece, because this particular piece has some curves and angles that don't really match up very well with most other LEGO pieces, and it seems like no matter what I do, I can't really get a good clean look out of it. Now, LEGO has used this particular nose piece on quite a lot of LEGO vehicles that they've made, and somehow I have managed to deal with it, and I haven't ripped them out and just rebuilt a better looking nose. I've been able to work with it and have kept them. So that being said, for this particular vehicle, I got rid of the 1x2 slope bricks and just added in the 1x2 bow slope with the little cutoff corner right there, and I've also added in these cheese wedge headlights. I also improved this part down here by using 2 of these 2x6 plates with rounded corners. Now, the other thing you may notice is that the cab is actually sitting 1 plate taller than what was on the original set. And that has to do with something that I've been doing to a lot of my industrial truck cabs. And that has to do with a protocol that I have for the seating position of my LEGO minifigures. So when it comes to industrial vehicle cabs, I really want my minifigures to be able to sit an official LEGO seat. Now, it's not really possible to use these seats on LEGO cars just because there's no headroom, and to make the vehicle taller wouldn't quite work. But for large industrial vehicle cabs, I could totally get a seat in there. And this is a generic piece that I kind of put together just to kind of show you guys some of the proportional dimensions of my industrial vehicle cabs, just to demonstrate to you guys my protocols for scale of the industrial vehicle cabs. Okay, so for industrial truck cabs, what the LEGO designers like to do is to put a base plate, and it's usually like a 6x6 or a 6x8 or whatever, right on top of this fender piece. And then the minifigure minifigure will sit on top of this base plate, right about where you see the dark azure. And if I were to leave that and I still wanted to have the seat, then what happens is that the seat would raise the minifigure up by one plate, which then means that he's kind of sticking too high up within the cab. And I like it to have it so that the minifigure's face is, right where you would expect to see it on a windshield, and also on the side window. And what I do is I'll restructure the whole cab so that the minifigure chair sits right on the fender, sits at the same level as the vehicle base plate. There are one or two vehicles that may be an exception to this rule, but for the 99% of the time, I have a minimum of one brick and two plates on top of the vehicle base plate, or 2 bricks in height on top of the fender. The other thing that I always do, and this is regardless of whether there's a seat or not, I always raise the steering wheel by one plate above the minifigure's seating surface. So if the minifigure were to be sitting directly on this blue plate, then I would have a 1x2 plate, and then I would have the steering wheel. Whereas in this case, the minifigure is sitting on the brown chair, I would have a 1x2 plate that raises the steering wheel above the surface of the seat. Alright, and let's get on to the real action of this flatbed tow truck. So the first thing I did was I needed to make the flatbed 8 studs wide so that it could incorporate all different sizes of vehicles. So not only can it fit the car on the back of here, but I can also get even longer cars on here. I can also get even longer cars on here. I can also fit even bigger trucks with the giant wheels on them, and even large diesel trucks will fit on there quite nicely. And you're going to recognize this car as the MOC that I created for Tayshaun Harris. I absolutely love how this car came out. It is completely awesome. I just wanted to say that I've included a functionality in the flatbed tow truck that helps with cars that are very low to the ground, sports cars and lowriders. Alright, so in the original set, the flatbed only came with one functionality, and that was the ability to tilt. In real life, flatbed tow trucks can slide backwards and lift up. The back end of the truck can also be tilted up, and this is what helps get cars that are very low to the ground up onto the truck. And so that's what I did. This bed can slide back, it can tilt up, and the rear 30% of the flatbed can be tilted up so that it can get especially low to the ground so that the angle isn't too steep for cars. And this is a real feature on flatbed tow trucks. One other feature of awesomeness that I wanted to include in here was the hydraulic ram that can lift it up. It wasn't really necessary, but I really wanted to add it for extra awesomeness. And this is something that I'd like to try adding to anything that lifts up. If I could add this to my garbage truck, I would totally add this to my garbage truck. I would add it to my dump trucks. And I went ahead and just unattached the flatbed. And you can see here, I'm using some Technic beams for the back half of the truck so that I could get the hydraulic ram to sit in this cavity here. In order to get the structural stiffness so that all the force is resting on the wheel axles themselves, I'm also using these, I like to call them zigzag brackets. It kind of goes in a zigzag. I've got them here and here as well. And so if you were to push down on this Technic brick, it would put all the forces down on these Z brackets, which are sitting on top of the wheel axles. Now, typically you would use those folding hinges, and that's what came with the set. But in order to get the geometry to work out just right, especially with this hydraulic ram and with the sliding features on the flatbed itself, I ended up having to go with this particular style. And this actually offsets the main sliding core of the flatbed by a half a stud. Alright, so now for the inner workings of the flatbed itself. So the flatbed can slide back, and here you can see I'm using a tile, a 2x4 tile, to act as the stop, so the flatbed can slide and then stop at a certain point. And also in the opposite direction, because this guy is offset by half of a plate, I'm actually using this 2x3, which is snapped onto these inner circles in here. So in order for me to remove the sliding mechanism, I just need to fold this up and slide it right out. I am using the 1x8 plate with the rails along with a couple of 1x2 plates with the rails, and you can see that I'm using the 1x4 bricks with the channel groove that's made for the plate with the rails, and that's how the flatbed just slides back and forth. Now, I wouldn't have been able to make this tow truck work very well without this particular ramp piece, and I actually started remocking this flatbed tow truck all the way back in, I think, 2016, and it has been evolving and evolving over the years. It wasn't until this last summer that it reached its final form, and one of the things I was able to discover was the ability to
use these Technic plates that also give the ability for the cars to drive right across the gap in there and still have the functionality to fold up, but it also gives me the ability so that when it folds down, it has to stop. Because of the square corner down there, it basically has to stop and can't fold down any further. I added these inverted 2x2 bow slopes, and this is how I was able to not only secure this Technic plate, but also add the taillights there. I've added the winch to the bed, and I'm using this Technic plate right there to use a Technic pin with a stud on the end of it to basically secure the winch to make sure that in case it's lifting any heavy loads, it's not going to rip the winch right off of the 4 studs. I really like this 2x2 bow slope feature right there because the truck cab is only 6 studs wide, and this gives it a nice aerodynamic shoulder to the bed right there. I wanted to keep this as slim as possible so that the cars can get as close up onto the back of the truck, and that's why I got rid of the original design and kind of went with this. For a while I did have a design where the winch was actually kind of hidden underneath and down here. However, it was attached here to the sliding thing before I had ever designed it for the hydraulic ram. That kind of didn't really work out too well because then the winch cable would have to stretch all the way to where the bed was. So in the end I ended up attaching the winch right onto the bed so that when the bed slides to the back, the winch is right there with it. Instead of the blue emergency flashlights, I prefer to use the orange flashing hazardous lights for just regular emergency vehicles. I prefer to only use blue for the emergency, like ambulances and police and fire. Alright, and I also added an attachment point here on the side of the bed for adding chains, which are used to attach the bottom of the cars, which help secure the car from sliding off of the flatbed. So I'll just reassemble this. Gotta fold that back, slide this guy in there, fold this back down, and then the hinge for tilting the bed is on these last 2 studs right there. And I've also included a couple of exposed studs right there so that when the bed is fully in its home position, it will snap down and it won't go anywhere. And of course, the tow truck driver has his remote control for operating the flatbed of the truck. So this is what he uses to raise and extend and pivot the tail end of the bed as he's lifting cars, and also uses it to control the winch, of course. All right, so if I want to pick up a car, all I gotta do is unsnap it, slide it to the back, tilt it up. And then to make sure that this bed is as flat as possible to the ground, what I'll do is I'll keep pressure on it and slide it back until it's as flat as it's going to be. And I'll get my little car. And then of course, modern day cars have tow hooks, which the tow truck driver has to get out of the car, which is hiding in the trunk where the spare tire is. And what they'll do is they'll pop a little hole on the bumper and then they'll thread this into the metal structure of the bumper itself. So what I'll do here is I'll just kind of take this and I'll pop this guy off right there, and then I'll take my tow hook and attach it to the back of the bumper, and we're good to go. And let's get the winch out. All right. And up the car goes. And then what a lot of tow truck drivers do is that once the front wheel is up onto this last portion, is they'll straighten this part out. Like so. There she goes. Now the front end of this car does scrape a little bit on the ground, and a big part of that is due to the autonomous driving sensor. So then what they'll do is they'll either lift up the bed or they'll slide it back, one or the other. So we'll go ahead and slide it back. Car is now up there. And then what I also like to do is I could attach some chains, and then I can also tighten those chains by rotating the chain around. And then of course I would do that to the other side too, because the winch is pulling on it that way and the chain is pulling it on it that way. The car really won't go anywhere. And there you have it, guys. That's my flatbed tow truck. Works just like the real thing. It's got the tilting, it's got the sliding, it's got the tilting of the back half of it for low riding sports cars. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope you guys liked it as well. Let me know what you guys think of my flatbed tow truck in the comments below. And if you guys really liked it, go ahead and give it a like. And on that note, I'll check you guys later.